Everybody, it's Jeff Allen, and so I want to this video here. I want to talk specifically about the long term kind of the funding schemes or the funding models of long term missionary strategy and their funding models, basically. And I made a whole nother video about my background with many different church denominations and actually missionary organizations, whether it be OMF, Wycliffe SIL, France Mission, um, uh, the uh, Campus Crusade, Compassion International, the Anglican Church, and then a bunch of different denominations with Foursquare missions too, and all that and stuff. So I kind of explained the whole background. I think it's good. It's worth it to watch that first, to tell you the truth, because that kind of gives it helps understand the how I'm able to kind of give this other video now about long term mission stuff. Because I've really thought about this, really gone through this with different experiences, positive and negative, over the past 30 to 40 years now, 40 years now. And and so I think just watch that video. I'm warning you, it's 55 minutes long. So put it in 1.5 speed to speed it up if you want to. So it'll take less time. And but that helps kind of provide the basis and the foundation to be able to look at this when I understand why I'm able to talk about this specific topic now about the long-term mission strategy funding. I have another video or two in this series. This is the series of the Missions and Ministries Realities and Fallacies series. It's a kind of a video blog series or vlog series. I'm decided not to write a book because it's just too long to write a book, and I got other things I got to write. So I made this in video format. It's a lot easier to create and consume. Okay, so for people, for me to create and for those to consume. And so I have another video on short-term missions and kind of what I think about that, and from some experiences and kind of seeing that. And then and I talked about one to another one about the Christians in the age of hunger. I gave a thing about that. There's a book on that that actually did kind of want to look at that too. I think it's worth it. Kind of take another complimentary. And I did that about 10 years ago, 10 years ago. So this is nearly a decade later. I'm thinking about it again and kind of adding more to the series. I had a cool tie and stuff and a shirt. Here I'm kind of in a restaurant, and um, so I'm just thinking about it again and adding more vlogs to this. Um, it's kind of nicer here than doing it from my car. It's actually easier to do too than do it the iPhone that just takes up so much space to create a video. Um, so the whole long term thing, long term missionaries, and I've kind of been through this. I said go watch other videos because it tells my background of all these other organizations, these different mission organizations, and how they function. I've seen how they work, and um, yeah, over a period of years, not just for a summer. Have seen how they and understand. Have talked to missionaries and you know with family members that have been missionaries too, and talk with them and how they see the organization stuff and all that. But long term missions, I've been really thinking about this over the past month. The whole strategy of long term missions, and I had looked at different ones too, and I was deciding to get into missions and looking at it and how they all function and kind of evaluate those when I was much younger. I was far from having gray hair. Um, but I think the gray hair now adds a little bit more perspective to it. That long-term missions, as I look at this historically too, and I got all the background in the Bible stuff, so I mean I know the historical stuff. I've taken lots of history courses and lots of Bible courses and stuff, and read a lot and lived a lot, and so I've and there are people of more, of course, but I'm thinking about this whole long-term missions thing, having lived overseas half of my life too, um, over half of my life, um, and not lived as a missionary. I've lived as a tent maker for the whole time, in a completely different scenario than most people have been through, um, and I just think of it that the whole way that that the those have kind of gone through to get where they're at. And one of the things that I really appreciated in not having been uh, part of the mission, the typical conventional missionary funding model, which is to to raise support, financial and prayer support. Of course, she always says prayer support, but it's financial support. I mean, the majority of it is yes, it's prayer support, but it's if you don't have the money, you can't go. The prayers won't get you there if you don't have the money. This comes down to that. So, um, um, and finally having to raise that, it's different to raise it as a single person than to be it as a family. Okay, so that's very clear. Um, and having seen a lot of the different approaches that people use to do their letters and how to do their courting letters, and I've seen a lot of received a lot of them. I made them myself. I've got lots of copies of the ones I made when I was doing this. So, um, but the whole thing of the I've really thought about the idea of sending people away to sending people from a well developed and economically stable nation, okay, to nations that are less, that need help, okay. I'm going to say it's always they need help. They're the needy, okay. I'm going to say it that way. Um, I'm not going to be very politically correct here. I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but you know, there's things, and then there are different kind of on the spectrum. There are the nations like France or Europe, which are kind of the old world of that were the actually missionary sending ones at the beginning, and then they've been they've undergone a thing where now they are the receiving end of missionaries for a number of decades. And then of course you have other countries, let's say Africa or Caribbean nations or Latin America or other countries, um, you know, Asia and all that, that are kind of less economically, um, I want to say stable, but they just, they're having more difficulty in the economic side of things. Okay. Um, um, Other people have certain words for those countries. Okay. I want to avoid getting to those words right now here. I just don't want to create political um, havoc. But so the whole there's been a kind of thing. I mean, we always pull out the maps of Paul's missionary journeys. I mean, I've got the maps in my Bible, the different missionary journeys and the different trips he made, and I've given sermons, and there are sermons. I mean, go look at my sermon channel. I've got the sermon channel on YouTube, the channel, the playlist on my sermons where I talk about you know Paul, the different books and how Paul was involved in the creating of those churches and how those. I kind of give a historical view of I believe one of those sermons about it. I kind of give a thing on that where I kind of walk through that and explain that the the whole thing of the funding aspect is, and here I'm talking long term. I'm not talking short term. Short term, there's another video. This one's more about the whole thing of is it um, is it worth to send? When it comes down to, is it worth people preparing for years to go somewhere? And often not to learn the language. They prepare just for the education. They do other things, all the awareness stuff. Actually, the language stuff they don't even do. They wait until they get there. And I'll tell you, that is a big mistake. That I've always warned people of that. I've just warned people of this because I'm a linguist, okay? So I'm a language person. Um, and I learn languages before I go there. I just learn them. That's the first thing I work on. Because if I can't learn the language and speak it, then the rest is disaster. And I've known people that have it, come and I know people that, been in France for a long time too and still struggle with language. That's tough. It's a tough barrier. Um, And I've known the people I've done a business stints, 2 year job stints, not missions, just that go and they just don't learn the language and they struggle for the whole time. Their family are on vacation the whole time, just kind of doing things because they're just not valuable to the local population because they can't speak the language, and that's really tough to tell you the truth. That's really really tough. Um, and so I really look at through that kind of filter of um, the value of people and their skills if they can use it in the target culture they're going to, and that's I really believe that's a key thing. And I think that we just really fail on this in many mission agencies and stuff to really work on that first. And of course, most of them coming from America. And the whole thing about the joke of America, folks, okay, is the joke about America. Okay, so the joke in LinkedIn or Facebook, whatever, is usually is when people put up a LinkedIn, it comes up all the time. How many languages you speak, and they say one, two, three. The poll 1, 2, 3, 4, and all the people from Africa are saying four. I mean, this is like someone doesn't speak four languages, like not a person. I mean, it's true. You go to Africa, you got lots of different languages. You might have parents speak different languages, plus your nanny. Plus, you go to school and you go into school and you learn another language top, and and then from some of the languages, the dialects. I mean, you go from one village to another, it's like a different one, or the whole span across a different country. I mean, even the same dialect, they can't understand each other. They got to use French, or English, or whatever, because the languages they're just so distinctly because of geographical distances and things. All I want to go into that right here. Um, so this whole thing of being able to communicate is really key, and a lot of the missions they don't. Language takes time, folks. It just takes time, okay? And you got to do it. Um, you got to do it. And if you get there, and people get there, it's just like culture shock, major culture shock. They're able to do. I mean, you can't communicate and stuff. Um, and I'll tell you, I learned Creole languages, and I got there. I was able to speak pretty well, and I was able to speak it. I was able to speak French pretty well. I was able to the Creole language pretty well and get my through the airport and stuff, and actually get through with 3 laptops and do it. I was able to communicate, and to get through with the whole week or 10 days and do it, and give a seminar on it. Okay, so I'm a linguist, okay, but I'm also just a curious person and who wants to learn the languages. But the problem with America, and I'm coming back to this whole thing of with the joke, is that the Africans all say, "Hey, this is like normal life for all of us." But so, who speaks 3 languages? Anybody in every other country. Who speaks 2 languages? A person in a bilingual culture. And who speaks Canada? Who speaks 1 language? All the Americans. Okay? And I'm not laughing here, okay, because it's true. There's a big truth about that. And there's an ignorance to the point that we think, hey, we go somewhere, we can go through and everybody's going to speak our language. I don't do that. I'll tell you that. Just I make an effort to speak any bits of any language I can. I'm American, but I speak any language just because I know it's going to help me get away from this American mentality of the perception of who Americans are. I try to avoid that as much as I can. But that's that. There is an arrogance to it that has caused it. So, you know, the English language, you can use it anywhere we want, and that's in tourism and everywhere. Okay, so it also kind of that whole tourism thing. I tell you, it's a negative thing. It really is a negative attitude. People are surprised I'm American. They're totally surprised when they don't have a language I speak or pieces of it. But so the whole thing comes in the mission stuff is if you don't learn the language, then how are you valuable? So I mean, how are you going to help the local culture? How are you going to be able to help on this? What are you going to do? What are you going to present? Um, how are you going to provide value? And in the end, what's your okay? We all talk about return on investment, okay, and return on outcome, ROO, and return on ROI. And there are always the reports of people how to do this, and it was a lot more difficult, a century ago when the communication wasn't as easy. So getting information back about the results of what you've done for a year or whatever by boat, uh, by phone. But even let's say, back when my great grandparents were doing that, I mean, there was no communication by phone; it was all by boat. So you wait months to get the information. But now it's all instant, the internet. So you know what's happening, you know the results, and I think this whole COVID thing has really shown us the value of we can't travel. People can't travel, so they can't go anywhere. So now we're seeing the real value of people and what they're doing, and at their value. What if you can't? If people can't go people places, and this has really made me think about the whole training of the whole thing of the the missions are kind of what they're doing. It's this long-term thing where they're depending on an American, or let's say North American cultures where there's money, and so we're able to fund it. What happens when the money disappears because of a major international crisis, economic crisis? Bam, there's no more money left. People don't have their investments anymore. Bam, they're shutting down any giving away, and they're being less generous. What happens when you have that? What happens when you begin to have this whole thing with COVID and people are out of jobs and they can't work and stuff? And what do you do with all these long-term missionaries? This is like superfluous extra stuff. Um, and it really makes me think about when I was looking into this, a few decades ago, looking at supporting local missionaries, supporting the local structure, supporting the local people that can be able to do the field work. Now, the problem when you do that, to be honest here, is you can support the people we're doing. So let's say if you're going to do Bible translation, just take an example, okay? So yeah, you can train the people to be, you got to training people in a couple different things, okay? When you do Bible translation, it's not so simple. They got to train them on, you got to teach them on, theology, because they're going to be translating the Bible. The content is theology, okay? Um, and I want to get into the difference, applied theology. I'm just saying the content of the Bible is about theology. So that's the content. But then you have how do you do the translation work? That's a whole nother field called translation, which is there's literal and there's dynamic, and there are different ways to do it. So you really have to you have to translate. You have to train them in two different things. You got to train them in the content to translate, and you got to translate them in the process to translate. And that's a lot of work. Okay, that's a lot of work. But now you got to add to it all the administrative stuff too. So all the administrative overhead, um, all the things that you're taking time, process, checking things out, all that kind of stuff, and finances, and administrative work and stuff. That's the kind of overhead. That's another 10% of all the costs and things, at least, for any organization, whatever it may be. So you got to, and who's going to take care of that? You're going to have the nationals doing that too, and taking the burden of all that. Well, they don't even have the money already. So who's paying for this? Who is actually funding the actual field work in the field, and then who's funding all the administrative work? Who's doing it? And this is causing a lot of rethinking to different missions about how they do this, because the COVID thing, a lot of people are just not functioning more because they can't be there. They can't be going there. They might be they might be staying home, in America or whatever, and then they're doing trips. They can't make the trips anymore. So what value is it? Even if they speak the language. And this, I think, that really begins to make us think about what is this model? What is this structure? Now, I'm not saying there's one, and I'm not saying that only one is good. I think there need to be different models, and I think there need to be models that need to be to adjust to them and deal with it. But I think there's kind of this whole COVID thing has really made us rethink this, because people are just they're twiddling their thumbs, not being able to do work that they've been doing before. And what do you have in a travel budget? Can't do it. What do you can't do these things? But do it by Zoom. But wow, the Zoom. Some people are good at using Zoom to learn and train, and some people are not. So this is a whole other thing. Then you get into okay. So now we talked about content. We talked about transmission. So content theology. Then you get the whole thing of the process to do it. It's translation. But now the communication means to make it happen, Zoom or Teams or go to webinar or whatever. And all the communication aspects can enter into this. So it makes a whole other, another layer here. And how do you do this? And here I'm not going to give you the magic formula, okay? I'm kind of bringing up a number of points that I think are valuable to think about, that missions need to think about, and all missions need to think about this. And I think I've got enough, I've got enough of experience as a heavyweight and in this whole kind of background, if you've watched my other video, understand I'm not speaking lightly about this. I've really carefully thought through this. And and I think that there need to be different models of how to do the national funding of nationals, really, and need to get away from this sending mentality that this happens everywhere. The whole sending material is still there. This whole mentality is sending people out to go out. And I mean, I see this in France. I see this in the States. Um, I see it in France too, and it's just like it's still there. It's like I kind of feel like France is like where we were 20 or 30 years ago in the States, because it's like this whole sending thing is like, hey, it's beginning to kick off now, and it's like, well, this is the wrong time to kick off, because it's like, hey, we've already learned our lessons, and I really think that now, do you bring the nationals to Europe or whatever to train them for a while and send them back? And that's kind of complicated visa wise. Okay, can you send Can you send short-term people to go teach people on topics for periods of time? I get this asked for this all the time. People want me to come and help on this, and I could spend my time doing that. A lot of time doing that. And I think about it. I think where my use of time is most useful and beneficial. And sometimes it's actually doing it behind Zoom and Teams and Skype, and sometimes it's better that way, because the whole trip thing won't change anything to what I'm able to add. I can actually communicate it, by video conference. And I think that the missions really need to really think about how they're doing it. I'm sure they are. There's a lot of strategic repositioning and adjustment and reorganization and all that. But I think that this, even for them to actually get the funding, because the way the missions function, if you really think about it, is they're getting in on the missionaries. They're sending missionaries out. Okay, wait, tends to work. Some of you might not even know how this works. So you have missionaries that you send, and they have to gather, they have to collect, support. There are different words for the support. Okay, so, but I don't want to get into different politically correct names here. So you got to raise your support, and you usually can't go until you have a certain percentage of that support raised. So you get to a certain quota, and the problem when you're doing this is, and so what happens? There's a chunk of that money that's actually taken out for administrative fees, usually. So for the people that run the offices and stuff, and like a 10%, maybe 10 or 15%. So, but then the missionaries have to raise all the money on top of it to be able to go and do the thing, and they're actually getting place. And there are different kind of levels of. I've seen different levels of kind of missionaries in the funding. I've seen people that I've seen people like my uncle and aunt that I know that they lived in pretty basic stuff. They lived in pretty basic homes, and they had a house in America too, which is pretty basic. But when they lived in, I know that they lived in basic stuff, because I knew my cousins, and I know my cousin, and they lived the kids grew up in boarding school too. But and then I had another missionaries that come to, I've seen in France that have houses better than rented houses better than my own house. So that says a lot too. And I think that there are different levels. And I think what happens when you start getting to that point where you're spending more money sending people overseas to have better homes, to have equivalent homes of their home culture. That's, and I'm not saying that people need to be in poverty completely, okay? Because of that whole mentality too. I've seen that too, in the French culture too, where it's set to a kind of low poverty. And I want to get to this here in this here at the end here. And I'm going to talk about this issue of how it corresponds. Actually, it's very similar to the translation field of commoditization of prices and lowballing prices. I've seen this happen. I think the missionary kind of funding thing has caused that. And I get to this kind of the interesting part of it. But what's happened is caused this high level of standard of living. And so what happens? What if you don't have that anymore? What if your home group can't fund that anymore? What if you've gotten to the point where you've got to have the nice car, the nice house, and what if your home country can't send that amount of money anymore? What if you got to live in half? You got to go back home. And what are you gonna do back home? Some people leave mission things because they can't do it anymore, because they can't keep raising the money. It's really tough. So what's that, and where in the target culture, at what level do you live? I really think about that. And I think that there are different. It's not an easy thing to do. Okay, I'm not saying this is easy. I think this has to be thought through. But there's also kind of what is the expectations of what you have to have when you get here in a country overseas, and what expectation of the amount you must have to be able to do that, and the amount you need to spend, and where the office is actually positioned. Position a place that's kind of really nice and posh, because if you are, hey, that's going to cost more. You're going to have more money to live around there. That can handle it too. Um, so I think this really, you kind of have to think about the whole that whole thing, and and I think about this. Um, what I think this has done is that the standard living thing has caused it that it's left it to a position. It's left in a situation where it's left holes, and so there's an expectation you got to have money, and it's created this kind of this overseas missionary thing has created kind of a new wave. It's a new, not a new generation. It's a different angle of imperialism. Okay, so you had imperialism. Look at the whole history of all the empires: Roman Empire, the whole Byzantine Empire. Um, Look at all the history of religions and history of humanity and stuff. I mean, I'm not going to do all this whole thing because I'd have to explain so many different history classes I've taken. It would just, I could go for hours. Those are like semester classes, folks, So, um, but there's plenty there. And look at the slavery context and the whole context of the slavery trade, slave trade, and all that. Look at the whole context of colonization and decolonization. I wrote a master's thesis on this, folks. So this is not my master's thesis was not just about linguistics. It was about the whole colonization, decolonization, but I put it into the context of language and how the languages were evolving at that period of time. And so my thesis is really about that whole process and how language was used as a vehicle during those periods of time. And the whole thing about the former lexifier language acquisition at the time of the thing I invented on that. And this all comes from looking at all this and analyzing. And I think what's happened now as I look back, and that was 30 years ago when I wrote those and did that work. And the influence of TV and television and media and social media and all these iPhones and Androids and stuff. And I mean, I think the context of media and information content set we deal with every day. I think that we've created another imperialism. If you look at the whole thing and look at all the Jesuits sent out from Spain to Southern America, and what was the result? Watch the movies about the movie The Mission. Watch 1492, of Christopher Columbus, and watch the movies of that kind of tell those stories, because it wasn't all pretty and it wasn't all great. It wasn't all glorious. And then there were the things of whole. What did the Roman Empire do? What did it create? And when it fell, what did it do? It left a lot of holes. Look at the whole thing of the. I mean, realistically, what did the slave trade do? It created a thing of work labor and labor force, but then in the end they couldn't do it anymore. Look at the whole thing of the colonization and decolonization. I'll tell you the truth. I mean, look at what Europe did to Africa. And then, it all based on natural resources, and one of those natural resources, and we haven't really changed it because now it's all switched over to a completely different thing, and now it's military intervention based on oil, the oil, industry. If there's no oil, then people don't get attention. It really comes down to that. In real terms, Iron Man 1, he woke up to it. Tony Stark kind of woke up the whole thing in the movie. That movie that tells you a lot. It shows you a lot of things. Very powerful. But look at the. I think this key for the whole. I see that we've created another imperialism, and I don't know what to call this. Okay, I'm looking for the word. I'm just trying to analyze this, having thought about it. I'm not trying to judge it. Okay, I'm just trying to analyze it, having been through this, lived through this, gone through it and been, alongside at the same time and thought about it and wanted to be part of it and wasn't able to and all that. So, um, but I think it's really, I think that there are a parallel. And what's happened is, so America sent all these, mainly U.S. sent a lot of these missionaries over to Europe because the old world that's now, has the least amount of population. It's easier to go to the old world. Okay, so it's easier to go to the old world to Europe because the languages are the same. So they're not the difficult languages. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to send missionaries from the U.S. to Spain, to Europe. So okay, we already speak Spanish in America, so that's kind of easy, Yeah, it's just from a different dialect. Okay, so it's easy to send people to Spain, which has low attendance of people in churches, and okay, so we get people from Cajun. Okay, Louisiana. Hey, we can send them to France because it's easy. So it's easy to do in England, England, too. It was all these old world countries that were the ruling countries of the time, and the Reformation, the Renaissance, and the Middle Ages, and all the Middle Ages first, and all that. So, and then they become the unchurched, and they've gone through their cycle. And now it's easier to send people there because hey, it's easier to justify it. It's the language are easier to learn. Hey, it's harder to send it to on the other 6,000 other languages. Over 7 billion people live. It's hard to learn those languages. So it's easy to get people to send people to these countries that have these languages and actually get the money, raise the money to be able to do this kind of thing. Be honest. But then what happens is it creates a dependency on creates this dependency on the funding world to the needy world. Okay, and this creates a thing in France. I'm seeing in France where these churches and people have depended on all these missionaries for so long, for decades. What happens when they got to go back home because there's no more money, or they retire. There's nobody to fill it up because they don't have money anymore, folks. And it's created this hole. I'm really saying this has created a massive hole. And there wasn't enough investment in trying to transfer this as quickly as possible to the nationals and get them to do it. I mean, sure, there's attempts. I mean, there were Bible Institute stuff. But the whole thing is, and it didn't train people how to actually do marketing on churches, do marketing to get money. And so the French people are bad at selling, just really bad at selling in business to start with. And they're just not very good at the churches either, to tell you, because they can't convince people to get money because they're trying to do it a traditional way and it doesn't work. So it's really, I think that this whole model needs to be rethought through. It needs a revamp, um, and to be able to do it for long term in a different way. I'm not saying you have to completely revamp everything, but I think it's just not working. It's just not working. Um, and so it becomes kind of complacent and it's not going anywhere. And so it's causing this culture of all these people who have been dependent for so long. And it's really the dependency is no different than I see for the Africans, who are dependent on the white Europeans. And I see the same thing today. I just see it. Um, and I see this in the whole, I see this in the overall kind of diversion and inclusion kind of thing. I can see it in that kind of framework, and I just see that there's this whole thing of the Africans just don't want they kind of feel that they still even if from independent nations that have been independent since the 1960s, folks, and we're in 2021 right now. They just feel like that when they're in meetings and stuff and committee meetings with the Europeans that they must be they must obey the Europeans. I just watch this and I just say, this is wrong. I mean, this is just not good. Um, and I do everything I try to do. I've tried for decades to try to help liberate and free the different kind of the different populations of the languages I work on to be free from under a kind of an ongoing slavery, imperialism kind of thing. And I've been doing that for decades. And then when I see this happen, same in the church kind of environment too, and decisions made, it's kind of like I haven't had to kind of obey the Europeans. I mean, just like, whoa. I mean, this is and afraid to say no, and afraid to say that. It's like, oh, I'm not afraid to say no, because I'm just not. Um, and I really respect it. I'll tell you, I really respect it when I see the Africans saying no to me. I respect it, and I tell them I respect it because I really believe that that's great. That they are able to stand up to a white guy and to say no, I don't agree with you, and that's great. And I tell them, I just really, I think that's, I can't say how many times I think that's great. Okay, because I think that's really good for them to be able to speak out, and everyone needs a voice at the table. And things, I'm usually very vocal about what I do, so that makes it a thing. Is another want to kind of more timid about that, but I really encourage people to be vocal because that's the only way things happen. When you're timid and stuff and don't say anything, then it kind of doesn't go anywhere. So this, I think that this whole, I don't know what to call this. I don't really know what the, you know, again, I want to call imperialism. There's empires. These are empires. It's just a different empire. I mean, again, there were different ones. The whole thing. We can go through the whole, all the different invasions and empires that happened over from the beginning of time. I mean, you can see this, and it's these are. I think that we need to benefit from history. We need to look at what history had. We need to really look at that. We need to study history. We need to study some things and try to not kind of recreate the same, not have a broken record, um, and redo it again and reinvent history. And all these things I think are really have great value to be able to look at and do. And I think if you missionaries need to be pretty well versed in history. They need to understand history well before they go anywhere. It's not the economics that are going to do it. It's these things are they need to have a good culture on that side. They need the languages. And of course, there are skills you need to have. Okay, so if you don't have the skill how to fix the plane, then you won't be able to fix the plane. And I think that's a really valuable skill. I just think that there are some skills that if you don't have the other skills, the social skills, you won't be able to get by. And this caused a lot of burnout and frustration with people because they just don't know how to function in functional reality. And for the long term stuff that has, and maybe it doesn't need to be long term. Maybe I'm challenging us to think about the long term nature of this kind of Christian evangelization. And another thing too is this whole idea of bigness. Okay, I came from big church. Okay, I came from a church that went from small to really big in 10 years, and I totally understand the mentality of it. And that was kind of a really conservative kind of approach. They weren't really very we are a big church thing. I mean, it really wasn't. But it did have that the functioning, the industrialness of things and how things were done. But I benefited that. But when I came to a small church in France, and I'm glad I went to a small church in the U.S. for a while too, because I helped. But coming to a small church in France and being able to adjust to that took a while because it's just way different, folks. And how you work in relationships, and the relationships make them more happen than actual talent. It's way more about the relationship and how you do it. And you can be talented as you want, really, and you can be as great as you want. But if you don't have that relationship stuff, you will destroy things. You can really hurt, do a lot of damage. Now, I'm not saying I'm a great relational person, but I've learned to be a much better relational person over time. I've really worked at that. I really do everything I can to do that better because I can always learn. But the thing is, all the talent you want won't change things, and especially over time, especially over long periods of time. You can come in, realistic. You can come in you can do come in for a 2 week thing and 2 week thing and do a lot, build a house, build a church, build things, construction, bam, 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 bam. Or you can come in and help them, work on things on the computer stuff, how to learn this, that, bam, 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 bam. That's all skills, okay? Those are all technical skills. But if you're going to stay a long time, you got to have value in the whole social circles and the skills and all that. And like I even wrote an article working with the French for Business Magazine, you got to master all the skills of how that works. And same thing for other countries. When you want to go to those other countries, how can you do it? And I just think of all these documentaries about going and see about Africa and Asia and see them. They have the stars, celebrities. They go and spend a week there, and they take them there, and they're completely just disoriented and completely, culture shock. And it's great because you got to see how they have to use different skills to do it. It's not about the technical stuff or how you can do things. It's the relational skills. So I think these are a lot of great things to look at and think about, deal with, and I think the missions really do to really rework this and rethink this. I'm sure they are. They're trying to do it already, but it's tough. But to kind of do this as I think of how to come out of the COVID, how to deal with the COVID kind of approach and what's happened with the approach. It's just what's happened with COVID and how to survive that further, because I think the COVID thing has just financially wiped out a lot of funding that used to be there. Um, it's harder to pitch it now and get it. So it's hard to pitch it in the business industry. I'll tell you, it's hard to do it. But I can imagine it's really really tough in the industries of these things. The industries, the kind of church giving all this. It's not a. It's an extra. People give. They've got it. And everybody's got it. If you don't have money, if you're not, you have a job. So this is kind of tough stuff, folks. But so thanks for sticking around for 40 minutes and listening to it. My thoughts on this. Again, I'm not saying this is hard and fast, and I'm not saying I am believe this 100%. I'm thinking through this, and I do these videos to think through some things too, and I want to. This chapter is an unfinished chapter of this book. I mean, it's really we're in the draft format, folks. Here, you're participating and being able to comment on the drafts. I'm thinking through these things, and these are things I think we need to. Again, this whole book was intended to kind of help train people before they get somewhere, and to help about the things that we actually don't talk about that much in these formal trade education courses. And these are some things you won't hear much about. So and I'm approaching it, and I'm dealing with the taboo areas and all the things that you shouldn't talk about, because I think this is the experience that we all need to learn from, and I'm constantly learning from it. So thanks for sticking around and for your just willing to do it. And if you've got comments, well, let me know. Thank you very much.